The long-standing rumor about Prince Harry's parentage remains exactly that, a rumor repeatedly denied by those involved and contradicted by the timeline, despite decades of tabloid speculation. In the dramatic style of much online commentary, some accounts still insist there is no way back for Harry with the royal family, that his choices after marrying Meghan Markle have left him isolated and regretful, and that explosive claims from commentators have sealed his fate. These narratives often circle back to an old, persistent whisper, the question of whether James Hewitt, not King Charles, is Harry's biological father. The claim is sometimes framed as newly confirmed by science or DNA results that the palace cannot suppress. In reality, no credible public DNA evidence has ever established that, and the chronology makes the suggestion biologically impossible. On July 29, 1981, roughly 750 million people watched Charles marry Diana at St. Paul's Cathedral. The fairy tale image quickly cracked. Charles was emotionally distant and remained attached to Camilla Parker Bowles. The marriage was troubled from early on. Diana felt isolated. William was born in June 1982 and Harry on September 15, 1984. Diana's relationship with Major James Hewitt, a cavalry officer, began in 1986 after Harry's birth and continued for several years. She later acknowledged the affair publicly. Hewitt has consistently stated he is not Harry's father, noting that Harry was already a toddler when they met. Diana's former bodyguard and others have corroborated the timeline. Harry's red hair is a documented Spencer family trait. Harry has addressed the rumor himself. In his memoir Spare, he described the speculation as fueled by sadism and tabloid appetite, noting that some reports even claimed journalists sought his DNA. In 2023 court proceedings related to phone hacking claims, he described 2002 articles about an alleged plot to obtain his DNA for a paternity test as hurtful, mean, and cruel. He said the stories felt damaging when he was 18 and that he only later learned his mother had not met Hewitt until after his birth. He questioned whether the coverage aimed to undermine his place in the family. Fact checks of circulating claims that a DNA test has proven non-paternity have found them false. No reputable reporting supports such a result, and older unverified tabloid claims, including one reported test that supposedly showed no match with Hewitt, never produced public scientific confirmation of the rumor. Harry and Meghan stepped back from senior working royal roles in 2020, relocated primarily to the United States, and have pursued independent media and philanthropic work. Relations with the wider family have been strained, marked by public disagreements, memoirs, interviews, and limited contact. Harry retains his titles as Duke of Sussex and remains a prince and a member of the family by birth and law. He has not been formally removed or declared illegitimate. Speculation about regret, permanent exile, or a sudden scientific revelation that rewrites his status continues to circulate in certain commentary circles, but it rests on the same unproven rumor that has been circulating for decades rather than on verified DNA evidence or constitutional action. The original story of the marriage's early breakdown, Diana's loneliness, the affair with Hewitt, and the subsequent media obsession is rooted in documented history. The leap to a confirmed biological truth that upends Harry's identity and permanently expels him is not. The timeline, the denials from Hewitt and others close to the events, Harry's own statements, and the absence of any authoritative DNA confirmation all point the other way. The commentary continues to insist that Prince Harry carries deep regrets over choices that have left him estranged from Britain, his family, and the public royal role he once valued. Historian and broadcaster Rafe is quoted arguing that Harry's path has clearly produced those regrets. The same narrative then challenges the established timeline of Diana's relationship with James Hewitt and claims new DNA evidence has confirmed long-circulating suspicions about Harry's parentage, with severe consequences for King Charles and the remaining family relationship. Harry was born on September 15, 1984. Diana's affair with Major James Hewitt is documented as having begun in 1986 after Harry's birth. That chronology has been affirmed by Hewitt himself, by Diana's former protection officers, and by Harry in his own statements. In the 1995 Panorama interview, Diana confirmed she had been in love with Hewitt and that the relationship was adulterous, but she did not supply a precise start date in the broadcast. Subsequent reporting and testimony from people close to the events have consistently placed the beginning after Harry's birth. Hewitt has repeatedly and explicitly denied paternity. In a 2002 interview, he stated there was no possibility whatsoever he was Harry's father because Harry was already walking when the relationship started. Later interviews repeated the denial. Claims that he once refused to comment or gave contradictory answers do not override those clear public statements. Physical resemblance is frequently cited. Harry's red hair and certain facial features are compared with Hewitt's, while William is said to resemble Charles more closely. Red hair is a documented trait on the Spencer side of the family. Subjective visual comparisons have never constituted genetic evidence. Reports that DNA results held by the palace now prove Hewitt is the biological father, and that this discovery has driven Charles into fury and further ruptured the father-son relationship, circulate in speculative commentary. No such verified DNA evidence has been published by any credible scientific, legal, or official source. Fact checks of similar claims have found them false. Harry remains, by birth and by law, the son of Charles and Diana, a prince, and the Duke of Sussex. He is fifth in the line of succession. Nothing in public record has altered that status on the basis of paternity. Harry's public record since 2020 is a matter of documented fact. He and Meghan stepped back from senior working royal duties, relocated largely to California, signed major media deals, including with Netflix, and released the memoir Spare. In those projects, they described the institution as toxic and racist, recounted an alleged physical altercation with William, and drew comparisons between Meghan's treatment and Diana's experiences. Those actions produced lasting strain with the wider family. Security arrangements, titles, and private wealth have remained subjects of dispute and negotiation. Commentators such as Rafe argue that Harry once thrived on the ceremonial and military aspects of royal life, parades, residences, the title itself, and that the loss of that role is a source of regret. Harry has not publicly framed his situation in those exact terms, but the estrangement from day-to-day royal life and the reduced contact with his father and brother are observable. The original speculative account treats the timeline as porous, treats physical likeness as decisive, treats alleged DNA results as established fact, and presents Charles as newly humiliated by a biological revelation after decades of public criticism. Verified history and the absence of any authoritative genetic confirmation point the other way. The 1984 to 1986 chronology holds, the denials stand, and the family rupture is the product of public statements, memoirs, and media projects rather than a sudden scientific disclosure about bloodlines. The drama of the claim persists in certain commentary. The documented record does not support its central assertion. The speculative narrative portrays Prince Harry as having tried to keep both the privileges of his birthright and a public critique of the institution that conferred them. He is described as wanting the status of a prince alongside the freedom of an exile, the palace alongside the podcast platform, and the benefits of royal identity, while casting the system that produced those benefits as corrupt. According to this account, the foundation of that identity is now collapsing under the weight of an alleged DNA result that strips away the central claim of being the king's son, a prince of the United Kingdom, and fifth in line to the throne. The devastation is said to be absolute because biology cannot be reframed in a Netflix series, monetized in a memoir, or softened by brand deals, Invictus Games appearances, or a carefully managed public image. The same commentary highlights what it calls Shakespearean irony. Harry spent years accusing the royal family of prioritizing image over honesty and of sacrificing individuals for institutional preservation, only to be confronted, allegedly not by his own radical transparency, but by laboratory evidence, with the most personal secret of all. The implications are said to reach the core of the monarchy itself, an institution whose legitimacy rests on bloodlines and succession. If Harry were not Charles's biological son, the argument runs, his place in the line of succession, his titles, and the Windsor descent of his children Archie and Lilibet would have been based on a fiction. King Charles is portrayed as exhausted by years of scandal, apology, and attempted reconciliation, and as now prepared to revoke the dukedom granted by the late Queen on Harry's wedding day, along with the HRH style, on the basis of genetic data rather than political process. Sympathy is presented as exhausted. The narrative recalls the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the memoir Spare, the use of Diana's memory in media projects, and comments that framed other family members' children as potential obstacles to Archie and Lilibet's security. It concludes that the 1981 wedding was the start of a tragedy rather than a romance, that Diana and Charles both deserved better, and that the British public was sold a story that was never true. The ultimate truth, it claims, has arrived not through confession or reconciliation, but through a laboratory result that palace public relations and Hollywood handlers cannot control. Verified history and the public record tell a different story. Harry was born on September 15, 1984. Diana's relationship with James Hewitt began in 1986. That chronology has been affirmed by Hewitt's repeated public denials, by people close to Diana at the time, and by Harry's own later statements. No credible, published DNA evidence has ever established that Charles is not Harry's biological father. Claims of such a result remaining hidden by the palace or newly forced into the open continue to circulate in speculative commentary and have been repeatedly fact-checked as unsubstantiated. Harry retains the titles Duke of Sussex and Prince. He remains a grandson of the late Queen and a son of the King in the eyes of the law and the line of succession. Archie and Lilibet occupy places in that line as the King's grandchildren. No official process has strict titles on the basis of paternity, nor has any laboratory finding been presented that would trigger such a step. The estrangement between Harry and the rest of the family is real and well documented. It followed the 2020 decision to step back from senior royal duties, the subsequent media projects that criticized the institution and individual relatives, and the ongoing disputes over security, funding, and public roles. Those tensions exist independently of any DNA claim. Charles has been king since September 2022. The personal relationship with his younger son remains limited and strained, shaped by the public record of interviews, books, and series rather than by a sudden genetic revelation. The 1981 wedding and the subsequent breakdown of the marriage are historical facts. The leap from that history to a confirmed non-paternity that rewrites succession and identity is not supported by evidence available in 2026. The dramatic framing, identity shredded by a lab result, titles revoked by biology, irony of radical transparency undone by the one secret that mattered, preserves the original commentary's tone and claims. The documented timeline, the consistent denials, the absence of verified DNA confirmation, and the actual sources of family rupture remain the facts that stand against it. At around age 20, an age when many people are still mastering basic independence, Diana was thrust into the role of future queen consort of a monarchy spanning a millennium, one that had endured plagues, revolutions, and multiple abdications. She was assured of love, protection, and a sense of destiny, framed as if she had been specially chosen. In reality, she was selected for the position. That distinction shaped the painful trajectory of her marriage. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, was, by multiple accounts from those close to events, emotionally distant and unavailable from the wedding day onward. He remained deeply attached to Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Camilla, the woman he later described privately as the only person he had truly wanted. Camilla attended the wedding. Diana later reflected in interviews that there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. Diana found herself isolated at Kensington Palace, lonely and deeply unhappy. She struggled with bulimia and self-harm while feeling treated more as a public asset than a partner in private. In that context, she sought connection elsewhere. She began a relationship with Major James Hewitt, a British Army cavalry officer and riding instructor noted for his striking red hair. They met in the mid-1980s when he became her riding coach. The professional relationship quickly turned romantic. Credible timelines place the affair roughly from 1986 to 1991. Diana confirmed it publicly in her 1995 Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, stating she had adored him and been in love with him. Prince Harry was born on September 15, 1984, 2 years before the widely accepted start of the Hewitt relationship. For decades, that timeline served as the primary rebuttal to paternity speculation. Royal commentators, palace sources, and later Harry's own legal team pointed out that Hewitt was not yet in the picture when Harry was conceived and born. The physical similarities, red hair, certain facial features, and complexion, kept the rumors alive in private conversations and tabloid coverage for years. Prince William more closely resembles the Windsor/Mountbatten line, including echoes of Prince Philip, while Harry's looks diverged enough to fuel comparison with Hewitt. The conventional explanation was genetics. Red hair is recessive and present in the Spencer family line. Some independent analyses have described the particular shade as statistically improbable under a simple Windsor-Spencer combination, though not impossible. Improbable is language that tends to unsettle institutions that prefer certainty. The palace's long-standing approach was near total silence, no detailed denials beyond boilerplate statements, on the assumption that starving the story of attention would kill it. That calculation proved incomplete. The question has persisted for roughly 4 decades. Present-day facts reinforce the timeline. Hewitt has repeatedly and publicly denied being Harry's father, noting that Harry was already a toddler, walking and recognizably formed, when the relationship with Diana began. Diana's former protection officer Ken Wharf and other close associates have likewise stated the dates make paternity impossible. In his 2023 memoir Spare and in high court testimony related to media intrusion cases, Harry himself addressed the rumors as hurtful and damaging, particularly when he was younger and still grieving his mother's death. He has said he only fully registered the post-birth timeline around 2014, even though it had long been public knowledge. Charles has reportedly made light of the speculation in private family moments, which Harry found unfunny given the circumstances. No credible evidence has ever overturned the chronological record, and official recognition of Harry as Charles's son has remained consistent. The original narrative's core remains intact. A young woman selected rather than chosen, a marriage marked by emotional absence and a third presence, personal suffering, an affair that became public scandal, and a stubborn rumor sustained by appearance, despite a timeline that places Harry's birth well before the relationship with Hewitt. The past facts of the marriage, the confirmed affair, and the birth date stand. The present facts of repeated denials, Harry's own reflections, and the unchanged chronological barrier continue to define the story. For decades, the question of Prince Harry's paternity lingered in tabloid columns, dinner party speculation, and late-night comedy. It was never settled by science, because no such scientific settlement occurred. The chronological record has remained consistent and public. Harry was born on September 15, 1984. Diana's relationship with James Hewitt, the red-haired former cavalry officer and riding instructor, is documented as beginning in 1986, roughly 2 years later, and lasting until about 1991. Diana herself confirmed the affair in her 1995 Panorama interview. Hewitt has repeatedly and publicly denied paternity, stating that Harry was already a toddler when the relationship started. Diana's former protection officer and other close associates have said the same. Red hair appears in the Spencer family line. Physical resemblance alone has never constituted evidence. King Charles III is not a man given to impulsive public emotion. He is measured, deliberate, and shaped by decades of waiting for the role he now holds. There is no credible reporting that he has described any paternity revelation as the ultimate betrayal, nor that he has ordered the formal revocation of Harry's titles on that basis. The Dukedom of Sussex was granted on the morning of Harry's wedding to Meghan Markle in May 2018 and has not been stripped. The style of His Royal Highness was suspended after the Sandringham discussions of 2020 when Harry and Meghan stepped back from senior royal duties. It has not been permanently and irrevocably removed as a legal consequence of newly discovered DNA. Harry remains a Prince of the United Kingdom and Duke of Sussex, though he lives as a private citizen in the United States and does not perform official royal duties. Harry has addressed the old rumors himself. In his 2023 memoir Spare and in high court testimony connected to media intrusion litigation, he described the speculation as hurtful and damaging, particularly when he was younger. He has stated that he only fully absorbed the post-birth timeline around 2014, even though it had long been public knowledge. He has also recounted that his father once made light of the gossip in private, an unfunny joke in Harry's view given the circumstances. Those comments, the persistent media interest, and Harry's own decision to discuss his childhood and family estrangement in books, interviews, and streaming projects form the actual public record. There has been no sudden, humiliating scientific unmasking, no surgical excision from the line of succession, and no photographic evidence of a man genuinely and completely broken by laboratory results that do not exist. The fairy tale that died in a Paris underpass in 1997 was the public image of Charles and Diana's marriage. The institutional continuity of the monarchy, the legal status of its members, and the documented chronology of Harry's birth have not been overturned by DNA revelations because no such revelations have taken place. Speculation continues in some corners of the internet and commentary circuits. The verifiable facts have not changed. Harry has spent much of his adult life presenting himself as the overlooked spare, the neglected younger son, the boy whose mother was taken too soon, and the man whose father never fully saw or valued him. In the version of events advanced by some commentators, a hypothetical DNA result would reframe that emotional distance in a harsher light, suggesting that Charles might once have looked at the red-haired child and seen a daily reminder of Diana's infidelity and his own public humiliation. Under that speculative reading, Harry's lifelong sense of never being enough would be recast as the opposite problem. He was too much of a reminder, too much of someone else. That framing turns Harry into a tragic figure rather than a hero, a distinction tabloids have rarely bothered to make. In reality, no such scientific revelation has occurred. Harry was born in September 1984. The documented relationship between Diana and James Hewitt began in 1986. Hewitt has repeatedly denied paternity. Harry himself has described the old rumors as hurtful and has noted the timeline that makes them chronologically impossible. The British monarchy is not in a constitutional or succession crisis over this issue. Prince William remains the heir. Harry remains his brother in every legal and familial sense recognized by the institution and by the public record. Legal scholars are not debating the legitimacy of the line of succession on the basis of non-existent genetic tests. British taxpayers do fund the monarchy through the sovereign grant, derived largely from Crown estate profits and related security and household costs. In exchange, the institution offers continuity, pageantry, and soft power. When public faith in that arrangement is questioned, whether over cost, relevance, or personal conduct, the debate is real and ongoing. It is not, however, being driven by laboratory results that do not exist. Harry has indeed sought to tell his truth through a best-selling memoir, a Netflix series, and high-profile interviews. He has accused the royal family of emotional neglect, media-enabled harm, and institutional coldness. Critics counter that he simultaneously monetizes the very visibility and trauma he condemns, and that his self-presentation as an ordinary man sits uneasily with the privileges and platforms he continues to enjoy. Those critiques are matters of public argument, not genetic adjudication. King Charles has not drawn a line in the sand by stripping titles on paternity grounds. The Dukedom of Sussex still attaches to Harry. The style of HRH remains in used by agreement after the 2020 step back, not as a punitive revocation tied to DNA. Harry lives as a private citizen in California with his wife and children. He is not standing alone outside a lawyer's office in Los Angeles, abandoned by a silent Buckingham Palace, because no such scientific unmasking has taken place. The overlooked younger son, the boy who grew up in the shadow of a future king and a mother lost too early, the man who has meticulously curated a narrative of marginalization. These elements belong to Harry's own published account and to the long public conversation about him. They are not the aftermath of a laboratory report that rewrites the biological foundation of the House of Windsor. The fairy tale imagery of cathedrals, museum dresses, and princes in the rain remains metaphor. The documented chronology, the repeated denials, and the actual legal status of the people involved have not been overturned. Harry has built a compelling, commercially successful public story in which the royal family valued protocol over people and optics over affection. That account has proved highly lucrative. Multi-million-pound book deals, large streaming contracts, and global name recognition few private citizens attain. The core of the story is that he was a Windsor failed by the Windsors, a prince denied the love and protection his birthright should have guaranteed, a son overlooked by a father who could not or would not fully see him. The long-standing rumor that James Hewitt, the former cavalry officer and Diana's riding instructor, might be Harry's biological father has circulated for decades. It rests mainly on physical resemblance, red hair, certain facial features, and on the fact of Diana's confirmed affair with Hewitt in the late 1980s. Harry was born in September 1984. The relationship with Hewitt is documented as beginning in 1986. Hewitt has repeatedly denied paternity, stating that Harry was already a toddler when the affair started. Harry himself has called the speculation hurtful and has pointed to the same timeline. No laboratory results have ever overturned that chronology. King Charles has been publicly accused by Harry of emotional distance, favoritism, and failure to protect or understand him. Those accusations form the emotional engine of Harry's memoir, interviews, and documentary projects. An alternative speculative reading, that any distance might have stemmed from private knowledge of infidelity, remains exactly that, speculation. Charles raised Harry as his son. The legal and ceremonial status of both men has never been altered by genetic testing that does not exist. The British monarchy maintains its position through continuity, public consent, and the appearance of an unbroken line. When family conflict becomes public, as it did with the Sussexes' departure from senior roles in 2020, the institution has responded with measured adjustments, suspension of the HRH style for official use, withdrawal of certain public duties and publicly funded security arrangements in the UK, and a clearer separation between working royals and those living private lives. These steps were driven by the couple's decision to step back and by subsequent disputes over media, security, and public funding, not by DNA evidence. Harry's supporters frame any loss of royal privilege as punitive. Critics argue that the privileges were tied to the performance of official duties he chose to leave, and that the commercial empire built on his royal story continues to thrive. Both views are part of an ongoing public argument. Neither is resolved by laboratory results that have never been produced. The narrative Harry has sold, of the overlooked spare failed by a cold institution, remains his published account. The older rumor about Hewitt remains a rumor constrained by dates and denials. The monarchy continues without the constitutional earthquake the fictional version invents. The titles, the family relationships recognized in law, and the documented chronology of 1984 and 1986 have not been rewritten by science that has not occurred. The entire structure of royal privilege roles, patronages, and the apparatus of status that Harry has spent the past several years both leveraging and publicly criticizing would, in the scenario outlined by some speculative accounts, be dismantled in one decisive institutional act. Reports in that vein describe Harry as devastated. Images circulating in certain corners of coverage supposedly show a man in a disheveled jacket, eyes reddened and face twisted in distress, leaving a lawyer's office with the stunned air of someone who has just learned the contest was predetermined. Tears run down a face long familiar from the covers of Time, Vanity Fair, and countless tabloids across a lifetime lived in the public gaze. Fairness requires acknowledging that genuine emotion is possible. The shock of learning that one's biological father is not the parent who raised him, but someone barely known, could constitute a profound identity rupture that wealth, celebrity, or therapy cannot fully cushion. Such crises cut across class lines. No one should envy the experience of having a laboratory result append a foundational sense of self, least of all a figure whose public conduct has often proven abrasive over the last decade. Yet with Harry there is invariably a gap between the feeling displayed and the story constructed around it. That gap is where scrutiny concentrates. Any tears, however authentic, would also belong to a man whose commercial scaffolding, memoir, documentaries, podcast arrangements, and the carefully managed image of the wounded prince who fled a toxic institution to rebuild in California rests on the premise that he was a legitimate member of the family wronged by it. Remove that legitimacy and the grievance becomes far more complex. Without the bloodline, the claim of betrayal loses its fixed point. One cannot assert that an institution rejected a true heir if the heirship itself is called into question, nor accuse a father of neglect if paternity is in doubt. The architecture of victimhood would collapse, leaving a wealthy, famous individual who has spent years severing ties that may never have been as solid as claimed. Past facts ground this firmly in reality rather than speculation. Persistent rumors that James Hewitt, Princess Diana's lover, was Harry's biological father have circulated for decades, fueled by superficial resemblance and red hair, a Spencer family trait. Diana herself, Hewitt, her bodyguard Ken Worf, and others have consistently stated that the affair began in 1986, 2 years after Harry's birth in September 1984, making biological paternity impossible. Harry addressed the rumor directly in his 2023 memoir Spare, noting that his mother had not met Hewitt until long after his birth, and that tabloids had even plotted to obtain his DNA samples in attempts to stoke doubt. No credible, public DNA evidence has ever contradicted the established timeline or Charles's paternity. Claims to the contrary remain the province of sensationalist or debunked content. Harry retains the title Duke of Sussex, granted on his 2018 marriage, though he and Meghan agreed in 2020 not to use the HRH style after stepping back from working royal roles. Unlike Prince Andrew, who was formally stripped of the style, title, and dignity of Prince and Royal Highness by letters patent in late 2025 amid Epstein-related fallout, Harry has faced no such removal. Present circumstances add further texture. As of August 2026, Harry and Meghan are reported to be relocating from their Montecito, California home to the United Kingdom for an extended period so their children can start school there in September, while retaining the California property and a Portuguese residence. They remain non-working members of the family. Their Netflix arrangement, once valued in the region of $100 million, has been scaled to a first-look deal. The Spotify partnership ended earlier. And media commentary has noted high outgoings alongside questions about the long-term viability of their commercial ventures. Harry has continued legal actions against parts of the British press, appearing emotional in court testimony as recently as early 2026 when describing the impact on Meghan. Charity roles have also shifted. He stepped away from African parks amid human rights concerns at one of its parks and earlier left Centibale. The implications for the Sussex brand remain relevant even without any DNA or title stripping event. Meghan married a prince and became a duchess. The couple's global profile drew heavily on that royal connection to launch media and lifestyle enterprises that would have been far harder to achieve without the Windsor Association. Their 2020 departure was framed as a voluntary step back. Being involuntarily severed from official status would differ sharply in optics and practical effect from choosing to walk away. One can reasonably wonder how any such hypothetical development might affect ongoing Netflix projects, publishing contracts for Spare and related work, or private discussions in Montecito, or, given the 2026 move, in whatever UK base they establish. These are the tangible financial, contractual, and reputational considerations that attach to questions of legitimacy and status, whether the questions arise from long-debunked rumor or from actual institutional decisions. In the span of a single news cycle, recent developments have shifted Prince Harry from the world's most prominent royal exile into a far more uncertain and less commercially viable figure, a man stripped of formal standing. Severed from the bloodline he once claimed, and disconnected from the British throne he long insisted he wished to leave, now reportedly taken from him by the very institution he accused of seeking his ruin. The irony is dense enough to serve with clotted cream at a palace garden party. King Charles, for his part, is said to remain in his Buckingham Palace study, declining Harry's calls, directing his legal advisors to begin formal steps toward removing Harry's name from the official line of succession, and confiding to close aides a sense of relief that a question troubling him for 4 decades has at last found an answer, even if it is the answer he always dreaded. The drama carries a near Shakespearean weight, an aging monarch, a son of disputed legitimacy, and the lingering shadow of a late queen whose alleged infidelity set the tragedy in motion. It evokes King Lear, Edmund, and Gertrude simultaneously, staged not at the Globe, but across the front pages of the Daily Mail and the trending feeds of social media. That last detail may be the most dispiriting of all. The betrayal, the private anguish, and the potential constitutional fallout matter less than the way the most consequential revelation in the modern history of the British monarchy is being absorbed by the public with the same fleeting attention given to a celebrity divorce or a reality show elimination. Viewers scroll past it between ads for meal kits and mattresses, react with emojis, and choose sides as if ranking contestants. In doing so, they overlook a deeper reality. The monarchy has always been a performance, and audiences have long been willing to suspend disbelief so long as the costumes held and the script remained credible. That script no longer holds. Laboratory findings have, according to circulating accounts, breached the fourth wall, revealing not the polished, benevolent institution carefully burnished by palace public relations over centuries, but something messier, more human, and more fragile than many were prepared to confront. What comes next remains the question on every tongue, and the one least answered by the royal family itself. Legal complications could stretch for years, constitutional ones for decades. The personal consequences for Harry, for Charles, for William, and for the 2 young children in Montecito who have reportedly learned that their grandfather is not their grandfather and their uncle is not their uncle will echo across generations. Prince Harry set out to tell his truth, to make the world grasp his pain, and to hold his family accountable for the ways he believed they had failed him. The world listened. It bought the book, watched the documentary, nodded along, shared the clips, and offered the validation a therapy-literate, emotionally fluent public is expected to provide when a public figure bears his soul on a global stage. Yet truth, as Harry is now learning, cuts both ways. One cannot insist that the world face one's own account without accepting that the world may possess an account of its own. The findings that have emerged from those laboratory reports are ones Harry neither authorized, anticipated, nor controls. The spare, the narrative suggests, was never a Windsor. The self-described victim was never precisely the figure he presented. The fairy tale was never a fairy tale. And the red-haired boy who grew up believing himself a prince now stands amid the ruins of his own story, holding a document that has rewritten his life in a language he did not choose and cannot contest. Harry sought it. He demanded it. He constructed a 9-figure media enterprise on the pledge that he would finally drag the truth into the open. The truth has arrived. It is not the warm, affirming confirmation of victimhood that would have justified his flight to California. It is not a sympathetic chorus agreeing with his portrayal of a cold father and an indifferent brother. It is a laboratory report, a sequence of genetic markers, a paternity determination that, within a single news cycle, has reportedly shattered the elaborate structure of grievance Harry spent the better part of a decade building, publicizing, and monetizing. These claims sit against a longer historical backdrop. For decades, rumors about Harry's parentage circulated because of Princess Diana's later relationship with James Hewitt, an affair that began after Harry's birth in 1984, a timeline both Diana and Hewitt himself publicly affirmed. Harry addressed the speculation in Spare and in court testimony, noting past media efforts to obtain his DNA and the distress the stories caused. No major, independently verified laboratory results confirming non-paternity have been published by reputable outlets. Palace silence has been consistent, and Harry remains 5th in the line of succession under existing law, which requires primary legislation and Commonwealth consent for any formal removal. Recent months have also seen reports of tentative family contact and discussion of a possible return to Britain with his children. The sensational narrative that has gripped social media therefore collides with both the documented past and the still unresolved present, a story that thrives on the very media ecosystem Harry once sought to escape. While the deeper institutional and personal questions continue without clear resolution. Laboratory reports, according to circulating accounts met by Buckingham Palace with unusually swift and unambiguous firmness, are said to indicate that Prince Harry's biological father is not King Charles III, but Major James Hewitt, the former cavalry officer whose relationship with Princess Diana entered the public record around 1994. Precision is essential here, because Harry's public career has rested on a conspicuous and deliberate lack of it. If those claims were accurate, it would mean the man who has accused Charles of emotional neglect may not, in a biological sense, be Charles's son. It would mean the man who has charged the royal family with failing to protect him may not, biologically, be a member of that family at all. It would mean the man who filled 410 pages of a best-selling memoir with the pain of being the overlooked spare to the heir may never, biologically, have stood in the line of succession. The spare on this reading was never a spare. He was a stranger. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, enters the narrative at this point. When she married Harry, she made plain, the argument runs, that she had no intention of remaining a frontline working royal. Her plan, according to critics, was to secure a royal prince, relocate him to America, and begin life as private citizens and a celebrity couple. That project, the same critics now say, has gone badly wrong. Charles, the man Harry has vilified on a global stage with a consistency and intensity remarkable even by the standards of modern celebrity grievance, has, in these accounts, finally done what many observers long urged. He has cut the cord. The Duke of Sussex title is said to have been revoked, the HRH style permanently withdrawn, security arrangements ended, patronages reassigned, ceremonial roles redistributed, and the entire apparatus of royal privilege that Harry spent recent years both exploiting and denouncing dismantled with the quiet bureaucratic efficiency of a department closing a file that should never have been opened. Harry, we are told, is devastated real, visible, camera-documented tears of the kind that have become a recurring motif at moments of maximum media exposure, as though grief itself were a form of performance art and he its most practiced exponent. He was photographed outside a legal office in Los Angeles, face crumpled, eyes reddened, posture of a man who has just learned that the ground beneath him is not solid, but a trapdoor waiting 40 years to open. A pause is necessary. Harry's pain may well be genuine. Discovering, in the most public and humiliating circumstances imaginable, that the man who raised you is not your biological father would be a trauma of extraordinary scale for almost anyone, regardless of wealth or fame. No one is qualified to measure the full emotional weight of such a revelation. Yet pain, however real, does not erase responsibility for the choices made with that pain. Viewed against the claimed DNA findings, those choices appear considerably less noble than the story Harry has sold. Consider the position he has occupied for years, a man who accused his father of failing to love him while that father was, on this account, raising a child who was not biologically his. A man who accused the royal family of silencing him while the institution was, on this account, maintaining a silence that protected his identity, title, inheritance, and place in the succession. A man who accused the institution of cruelty while it was, on this account, extending a degree of forbearance most men in Charles's position would have found impossible to sustain for 4 decades. Charles knew, or at least strongly suspected. The timeline of the Hewitt affair, the physical resemblances, the palace whispers, the quiet conversations among courtiers possessed of eyes, ears, and ordinary pattern recognition, all pointed the same way, and all met the same institutional response. Silence. Not the malicious, conspiratorial silence Harry described in his memoir, but a protective quiet that preserved the public fiction. These dramatic claims must be set against documented history and present reality. James Hewitt's relationship with Diana began in 1986, 2 years after Harry's birth in 1984. Both Diana and Hewitt himself repeatedly stated there was no possibility of paternity. Harry addressed the long-running rumors in spare, noting that Charles never formally discussed them with him and that press speculation had caused lasting distress, including past attempts by journalists to obtain DNA samples. No major, independently verified laboratory results confirming non-paternity have been published by reputable outlets. Palace comment has remained absent, and Harry continues to occupy fifth place in the line of succession under existing law. Titles and styles were already adjusted in 2020 when he and Meghan stepped back from working royal duties. They retained the Duke and Duchess of Sussex designations, but ceased using HRH, a decision rooted in Queen Elizabeth II's original ruling. Full revocation of peerage titles would require parliamentary action. Recent months have instead brought reports of tentative private contact between Harry and his father, discussion of a possible extended return to Britain with the children, and Harry's resignation from certain charity roles amid separate controversies. The sensational narrative therefore collides with a more complicated record, decades of rumor, a protective institutional silence that was real, a public career built on grievance, and a present in which formal status remains largely unchanged while private relationships continue to evolve under intense scrutiny. The institutional silence that surrounded the long-standing questions about Harry's parentage was not the malicious, conspiratorial withholding he has described in interviews and writings. It was, rather, a protective and self-sacrificing quiet maintained by a family that chose, for reasons likely as much about duty as about affection, to absorb the potential humiliation rather than impose it on a child who had done nothing to deserve it. Harry repaid that silence by breaking his own. He sat for the Oprah interview. He wrote the book. He filmed the documentary. He told the world, in exhaustive and often excruciating detail, that his family had failed him, that his father had neglected him, that his brother had betrayed him, that the institution had broken him. He monetized the grievance. He branded the trauma. He turned the pain of his childhood into a content strategy. And he did it all while standing on a foundation that, according to the circulating laboratory claims, was never his to occupy in the first place. The hypocrisy is staggering, not as a casual insult, but as a precise description of the gap between the moral authority Harry has claimed and the moral authority he has actually earned. One cannot accuse a man of failing to be one's father when that man may not, biologically, be one's father. One cannot accuse an institution of denying a birthright when that birthright may have been a fiction sustained out of compassion rather than strict obligation. One cannot demand that the world confront the truth about one's family while simultaneously concealing, from the audience and perhaps even from oneself, the most consequential truth about that family. Yet that, the argument runs, is precisely what Harry has done for years across every available platform, with a self-righteousness that would be almost admirable were it not so thoroughly undercut by the evidence now said to have emerged. Charles's response, when it came in these accounts, was swift and absolute. There was no negotiation, no family summit, no carefully staged photograph signaling reconciliation, only a single, devastating act of institutional clarity. You are no longer one of us. The title is gone. The protection is gone. The connection, such as it was, is severed. Palace insiders are said to have described the king's fury in terms ranging from volcanic to apocalyptic, rooted not merely in personal humiliation over the claimed DNA findings, but in a broader sense that the compact the monarchy has maintained with the British public for centuries has been compromised. The public funds the palaces, the security, the travel, the staff, the entire machinery of royal life. In return, the public is entitled to a basic honesty about the nature of the institution it supports. That honesty, on this telling, has proved incomplete, and the king has drawn a line so sharp and so public that no ambiguity remains about where the institution stands. Harry is out, not by his own choice, not on his own terms, not with the managed dignity of a voluntary departure, but by decree, by the same institutional power he spent years insisting did not exist, could not harm him. and would ultimately be rendered irrelevant by the force of his personal truth. That personal truth has been overtaken by a biological one, and biology, unlike public relations, does not negotiate. These claims must be weighed against the established record. James Hewitt's relationship with Diana began after Harry's birth. Both parties publicly denied any possibility of paternity. The royal family's long silence on the rumors was real and protective, yet no independently verified laboratory results confirming non-paternity have been published by credible outlets. Harry's public disclosures, Oprah, Spare, the Netflix series remain documented facts, as does the 2020 adjustment of styles under which he and Meghan ceased using HRH, while retaining the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles. Full revocation of peerage titles would require parliamentary legislation. No such process has been confirmed for Harry. He remains fifth in the line of succession. Recent developments point instead to tentative private contact with his father, reports of a possible extended return to Britain with the children, and separate decisions to step away from certain charity roles. The dramatic narrative of abrupt institutional expulsion therefore collides with a more complex present in which formal status has been constrained for years, private relationships continue to shift under scrutiny, and the long-running paternity speculation, however energetically revived online, still lacks verified biological confirmation.